it's an incredibly valuable guard. It has a lot of application, gi, no gi, self-defense. You see people in MMA doing butterfly guard, sweeping, you know what I mean? So it's something that if you invest the time in it, it really has a very big application. You know what I mean? And I would highly recommend, don't just do it for a little while and say, oh, it's not for me, right? It also, I think it's equally good for tall people and short people, which is a little bit of an anomaly in jiu-jitsu. You know, there's some really great tall people that have a great butterfly. There's some really great short people. And I think that's one of the few guards where you can really say that's the case, right? So it's very variable to different body types.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here with longtime friend of the podcast, friend of the site, co-author on Nonstop Jiu-Jitsu, BJJ World Champion, Mr. Brandon Mullins. Hey, Brandon, how's it going?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. What I was hoping to do today, if you had some time, was talk about the butterfly guard section in Nonstop Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Could I add one thing to your intro?
Sure.
Can we add friend of jiu-jitsu in there?
Sure.
Okay, let's add that. Friend of jiu-jitsu.
Defender of the honor of jiu-jitsu.
No, let's talk about some butterfly guard. That'd be great.
So I think a common problem when people are learning jiu-jitsu in general or a position in jiu-jitsu is that they kind of get shown, okay, here's a technique here. Here's a butterfly guard sweep. And here's another butterfly guard sweep. And if they're lucky, those first two techniques are connected. And then they come to class the next day, and now we've moved on to X guard, or we've moved on to, I don't know, getting out of arm bars or whatever. So they've got those two butterfly guard techniques, and then they come back 3 weeks later, they've seen a couple techniques on YouTube, and this is a counter when the guy's trying to guillotine choke you when you're in butterfly guard. And they're just getting these things piecemeal, and there's no underlying structure. There's not like, do this, then do that. If the guy does this, then do that, and kind of a system to it. And what I really like about the way that you organized the butterfly guard section of Nonstop Jiu-Jitsu was that it was kind of grip and range dependent, right? Like, okay, we're going to start at long range. We're going to start with a decent grip. And then as you get closer and closer and closer, you're going to use similar techniques. You might have to modify them a bit, but you're using better and better grips, essentially, as you're going in, as you're closing the distance. Is that a fair overall description of your approach to the butterfly guard?
Yeah, 100%. I think so. You know, so as people may, I don't know if they know or not, but I mean, I'm a big fan of the closed guard, right? And that's usually the first guard that people know. And the reason that is because you have the most control. People can't run away from you. They can't disengage too easily. And you really have, you can take your time, right? So you can mess up a grip and it's not going to be a big deal because the person can't run away. But in the butterfly guard, there's a lot less control. So you have to really be precise with how you control somebody and how you position your body if you want to be able to actually be effective. And so that's something that I kind of learned over time, is that there's several different ranges, as you said, that are all still in the butterfly guard, but they behave differently. We got to have a plan for each one of them. You know, when somebody is really close, it operates a little bit differently than when there's distance between you. You know what I mean? If you have one underhook, it's different than if you have two. You know, if you got the hand on the collar, it's not the same as if you have the underhook. You know, so there's a lot of different things that can happen, and we got to make sure we're ready to deal with all of those. Otherwise, the person on top could just kind of overcompensate one way or the other. You know, some people might like distance. Other people might like a close situation. But if you really want to be effective, you got to be comfortable close, far, and in between. And that's exactly how I try to set the book up, because I know that was important. That really helped me when I started to realize that.
So what would you say obviously the furthest range is you're in butterfly guard and I'm 10 feet away, right? You've pulled guard or whatever, and we haven't yet engaged. But what's the sort of the first range at which we make contact?
I think the first range is no contact, not 10 feet away, but just I'm sitting and then my opponent is not touching but is approaching. Maybe they're going, or maybe I'm approaching. Maybe they're being a little bit defensive and I'm approaching. So that's the first situation. You know, there's no contact. And then from there, it just gets closer and closer and closer.
Right. So with the gi, one of the sort of longer range grips would be either cross collar and say the knee if you can get it. Whereas in the no-gi equivalent would kind of be a collar tie where you're gripping behind the head with one hand and then using the other hand to.
Yep.
Why do you prefer the cross collar? I got asked this the other day and I have answers, but I want to know your answers. Why do we prefer the cross collar grip as opposed to the same side?
I think the cross collar grip it's both offensive and defensive, right? So a lot of times when somebody is passing your guard, you make a sort of cross post to create some space so you're able to bring your leg over. So when you start off with that cross collar grip, you're already able to maintain some distance and you kind of create a specific angle that's a little bit harder for your opponent to take advantage of. On top of that, you can pull and push offensively if you want to. So I like it because it's very, very evenly balanced as far as a useful grip in terms of offense and defense. I can keep somebody away if I want to defend. I can pull people close. I can attack. So it gives me a very, very versatile platform to work from.
I agree with all that. I think there's also, it's a little bit harder to grip break. I think the angle isn't quite as nice.
Right. It is. Especially if it starts getting up a little bit higher, I literally can't get my hands on it. No, that's 100%. I think people are more. I think they're more used to breaking that kind of straight grip than that cross grip. That's a good point. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I got some time to brainstorm for this. I think the other thing is if you get the same side grip, sometimes I can sort of slide over the shoulder. You have a little bit less positive control with a cross grip. It's a bit more secure in the sense that it doesn't move around as much. I mean, of course it can.
Yeah, so I think you're right. So if I get a straight grip, somebody can kind of bully their way into it, and then that grip becomes neutralized. If I get a cross grip and somebody bullies into it, they just get cross choked, right? So again, it's harder to deal with because you have that defensive and offensive capability just right. It's kind of built into the position, and there's definitely times for a straight grab, but in terms of butterfly, that cross grip I think is much more valuable. Again, because you have less control from the butterfly, you need something that can operate offensively and defensively.
So as we move closer in range, as we go, say, from the cross grip or the collar tie to an underhook, which works gi and no gi, we've increased the level of control that we have now, right?
Most cases, yes. In most cases, yes, 100%. I mean, it depends a little bit on who's on top, but yeah, for the most part, underhooks are going to keep you safe, right? I mean, you want to make sure that you don't get flattened out, but I like to have, if I get double underhooks, being flat is okay. If I only have one, I need to be a little bit more seated. But almost, yeah, I mean, as a general rule, underhook is going to give you a lot more control.
Yeah, I mean, if you run into the one guy who loves passing butterfly guard when the other guy underhooks, well, we can't,
Yeah.
It's only an 80%.
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, the underhook, I'm looking, well, I'll say this. I mean, there's never a time I'm not going to be looking for that, right? As long as I do my part utilizing that technique, I'm in a great position.
What are you watching out for when you've got the underhook and you know I like to pass butterfly guard? Like what's kind of your like watch list for like, oh, he's setting this up, he's setting that up?
Well, so a lot of it is the placement of my underhook. You know what I mean? So what's really common, and this is not necessarily wrong, right? People do it and it can work. But I think one thing that makes the underhook more effective is, so most people, you underhook and you grab the belt, right? That's common. You know, we have the belt in jiu-jitsu. It's a pretty solid grip. But what happens is a couple of things. When I reach around and I catch that belt, my hand is relatively low. And so the person can usually have a better chance to re-pummel. 2, the belt will come loose eventually. And then my grip is no longer secure, right? So one thing that I like to do that I look out for is I keep my underhook high. I may not necessarily grab anything. I just get my arm up high on the back, up here actually. I don't like to grab the back of the collar. Some people do, but I feel like my elbow can maybe get jammed up. So I try to reach for the far shoulder. That's what I'm looking for. And then if I can open the collar and feed that out, it's even better, right? But in general, that's one thing I'm looking for is I want to get that underhook under the arm and reach around to that far shoulder. And something else I'm looking for is head position, right? Most of the time, if I have my right underhook, I want my head on the left side, right? That's going to put me in a good position to sweep and to defend, and it's going to make it harder for my opponent to create distance to start passing. Most of the time, the passer wants to create a little distance. He'll put his head on my chest, and then he can get into his pummel passes. He can change sides. He can jump over. But if I get that deep underhook, I get my head on the right side nice and tight, I control that other sleeve, then I'm ready to go for my sweep.
That head position, so say you've got the right underhook. You've got the right underhook, and your head is over to the left. So it's by the other guy's right ear.
That's right.
That's a little bit different from wrestling on your feet, isn't it? Because in wrestling, you usually go for a more shallow underhook, and your head is usually driving into the guy in his jaw.
Yeah, right in his ear, right? Yeah, so, I mean, the nature of being on your knees or your butt versus being on your feet is quite different. There are times you can put the head on the far side. If I want to maybe pull the guy's shoulder to look for a guillotine, you can do that. But in terms of general control, that other side, it's a little bit counterintuitive if you're coming from a wrestling background. But I think for the butterfly, because the way that we typically want to sweep, we need that head position. Because if I want to sweep and I have my underhook with my right and then my head is on the same side, what that means is my opponent can post on his head, possibly base out of the sweep, jump over to the other side, and then I'm lost, right?
And also you lose the ability to essentially throw your head, which is this 20-pound weight, well, 30 pounds in my case maybe, with all this Neanderthal brow, to use your head. And you're typically, if you've got the right underhook, your basic butterfly guard sweep is going to be falling to your left and lifting your right leg, right? That's the classic. Yeah. And if your head's not over in that direction, you're missing out on that additional momentum generated by your noggin falling to the floor. Right. So I guess that'd be another.
And if the person if they can re-pummel and their head is on that side, now they have like the best position. So if I have my head in position where I need to be and they re-pummel, it's going to give me a chance to stay in the game, so to speak, right? Because if they re-pummel on me, I can go right to my collar grip. And then I'm in a good side here. I can do a collar drag. I can push them away and reposition. But if I have that underhook, my head's on the back side, they push away and re-pummel, now I've really put myself in a bad position. So I think it helps having that head position on the far side off the underhook keeps them from being able to take advantage so quickly if they do pummel, right? Right.
It's funny. Jiu-jitsu guys or girls who are listening now are going, yes, this is the kind of detail I want to hear. And we've just lost everyone else on the planet. What are these? I suppose I would tune out if there were fly fishermen talking about using, I don't know, peacock feather from the left wing as opposed to peacock feather from the ruff of the neck. Like, I don't care. I don't understand. And more importantly, I don't care. But I suppose if you're a fly fisherman, that level of granularity is really important.
Well, you see, Stephan, a grasshopper larva is not an ant larva. And if you want to catch the right fish, you got to use the right larva. How? No, I mean, you know what? Like,
I have caught tens of thousands of fish back when I was a biologist, but we were using large nets, like we'd winch them down into the lake. So when I start dissing on fishermen, I'm talking about these people who like catching fish one at a time. You know, I'm much more a gill net and a trawl net kind of guy. If I'm going to catch fish for science or whatever, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go big or go home. So
that's it.
So I have a fair amount of fishing cred, just not in the usual way that people think. But people don't usually think of the butterfly guard as a submission position, although I think that with the advent of, not the advent, within Nogi, you see it as a submission position more often, leading into leg locks and leading into the headlock or the guillotine, attacking the neck or attacking the legs. In the book, you cover several methods of using basically a sweep off balance to set up things like the triangle choke, to set up other attacks, to use the sweeps to attack with submissions. So percentage-wise in your competition career, how frequent was it for you to submit somebody from the butterfly guard?
So for me personally, I probably submitted more people than I swept. I definitely swept a number of people with that classic butterfly guard sweep, but the triangle was a big part of my jiu-jitsu, and I was always looking for it. And my butterfly, my sweep, it didn't start off very, very good. I could always get people off balance, but I had a hard time sweeping them. And I realized that for whatever reason, I would lose control of people's arms. They would post it out. So over time, I realized that I can still take advantage of that. And I don't know where I learned this from, but as people bail out to stop the sweep, there's a lot of space there that I can reposition my legs. I also, in addition to the underhook, I would sweep a lot off the overhook because that's something I did a lot from my closed guard. So a lot of times I might get into the closed guard, get that overhook, people would begin to pass, and butterfly is a great way to kind of deal with that problem. The guard is opening, they're passing on their knees. I can't go back to the closed guard. Butterfly is a nice compromise. So in addition, I was sweeping a lot from the overhook, which lends itself to triangle omoplata. So for me personally, I actually got a lot of triangles from that position. Just as you said, I would kind of off balance people. And one thing that we go over in the book is that I would actually, instead of controlling the far arm, I would actually push it away from me because I wanted them to base. And the further they based away from me, the easier it was for me to get my leg out. So I think typically, most people, it's more of a sweeping guard. But for me, for whatever reason, I would get many more submissions than I got sweeps. I think it was mostly just, that was on my radar. That's what I wanted. That was the main goal for me. If they didn't sweep or if they didn't post and I swept them, I wasn't upset with that. But most of the time, I was really gunning for that triangle.
And jiu-jitsu is an arms race. If everybody started doing sweep to triangle from butterfly, if that became everybody's bread and butter, then everybody get much better at defending that. And all of a sudden, we'd be having the same conversation saying, butterfly guard, not only can you triangle choke, you can also sweep.
I think something else too that I think contributed to that was I always viewed butterfly guard as a two-sided position. You have to be able to go both sides, or your opponent's just going to sniff it out and just kind of lean off to that weak side. So I would normally pummel with my right arm, try to sweep, and then when they would base, I would go back the other way. Now I have the overhook, and then I would set that triangle up. So that's kind of what I think what would lead me into that as well, is that I was always trying to go both directions, left and right, with that butterfly, because I knew that it is kind of a one-sided position. So you got to make sure you can attack both sides, or people will just overcompensate.
Right. So underhook, overhook combination, I'm overgeneralizing here, but underhook, overhook combination, start sweeping with your underhook, but then know that might not work, and then attack the other direction with the overhook. That's right.
And one thing that most of the time, if you underhook somebody, most of the time, with some exception, people will repummel if you let them. If you let them repummel, they will. They're looking for that. They know that's technically what they should be doing. So a lot of times when I would sweep, right, if you can imagine I'm sweeping with the underhook, I have my overhook here. If I kind of loosened up on that underhook, they would get away. They knew it was a bad position, so they would kind of back up a little bit. So again, it made it even easier for me to jam that arm, go back to my sweep, and then hit that triangle, because it's kind of natural instinct that when you get a deep position on people, if they're either going to repummel or they're going to try to push away. And in my case, most people would start pushing away a little bit, even though a lot of times they would come back to repummel, but then it was too late, right? Once they gave me that distance, I was already on that wizard looking for that triangle. And again, I think some of it goes back to my personal style of doing a lot of overhook from the closed guard as well.
Right. Now, the butterfly guard is a wonderful position. It's one of my favorites, one of your favorites, but say it's just not working for you. In terms of bailing out and going to other positions, can we talk a little bit about that? I mean, obviously the guy hugely drives in. You're going to end up in some kind of half guard, probably.
Yeah, so half guard or closed guard. You know what I mean? Like, depending on what your starting grip is, right? I mean, depending on what sort of control you had. I mean, I found it most of the time when if I was in a competition, I was going to pull guard, I would have liked to just jump right into the closed guard, but a lot of times you can't. You can see it on people's face; they're expecting it. So a lot of times I would sit into the butterfly guard, really pull the guy, have him base out, sprawl out a little bit, and then you go back to that closed guard. Now, half guard is definitely an option too, and really those three guards are going to go together very, very well. You know, closed, half, and butterfly. But I think if you play it right, you could upgrade to the closed guard as well.
Right. And if the guy stands up, I mean, then it's automatically connected to the shin guard or the instep guard, and to the X guard.
X guard as well.
Yeah, those are they're just, you've got your feet on the inside line. So I'm switching to the closed guard as you do. Here, I'm going to pimp the book on page 151.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Double unders, closed guard, double unders, getting to closed guard against somebody sprawling. So, this is stuff that's actually addressed. But if the guy stands up, you've got your feet on the inside line. So it's reasonably easy to kick one or the other leg through and start the entanglement process of single leg X guard, full X guard, or converting your butterfly guard to a shin guard as a guy stands up. You need to control something. You might not be able to get the underhook anymore, but you can get the back of their knee. And
sometimes even that basic double ankle sweep. You know what I mean? When they stand up and you have them hooked behind the legs here, if you can catch each ankle. I mean, I had a lot of success just with that simple kind of sweep. It's and I liked it better than the traditional double ankle because your legs aren't vulnerable for a footlock when you land, right? It's easier and you can finish up, you can get on top with control. So I would have success with that when people would just lots of times they would try to push on me and stand up, and I would hit them with it right then. So even that basic double ankle sweep is definitely possible from the stand-up butterfly.
So you're talking about where you leave you elevate your insteps to behind the guy's knees, grab the guy's ankles, and then extend your hips.
Yeah, I'm putting my shins kind of on the inside of his thighs, pulling the heels, knocking him right over, maintain my grips, and I come right up on top.
Right. Well, it's an interesting time in jiu-jitsu with the popularity of no-gi and the popularity of leg locks. So having a butterfly guard, especially in no-gi, is almost not optional anymore. Have you started?
Yeah, I mean, you at least got to know how to defend against it, and you're going to encounter it at some level. You know what I mean? Butterfly guard is good offensively for attacking with leg locks. It's also good defensively for hiding your feet. That's kind of an old school thing. I'm sure you're familiar with that. But I think maybe a lot of the new people don't realize how good butterfly can be for hiding your feet against somebody. If you're on bottom and they're a leg locker on top, you go to that butterfly guard, you can get in tight. They aren't able to get to your feet as easily as maybe closed guard or half guard. If they're on top, you're much more vulnerable there.
Yeah. And I mean, you said as easily. Yes, of course, nothing's 100%, but there's stuff, are you going to give it to him on a platter or are you going to make him work for it?
Yeah, exactly. It's physically possible to be done for someone on top of me in my butterfly guard to leg lock me in some way, but the position does a lot of the work for me to defend against it. It's going to just give me a little bit of insurance, so to speak. Whereas if I'm in half guard, like you said, that leg is right there on a platter. Also kind of butterfly half is a good alternative as well to hide your feet, hide your legs, makes it a bit harder. So the idea of tucking your feet on the inside it doesn't just make your feet harder to get at, it makes your legs harder to get at, right? You kind of defend the whole lower body, which nowadays I think a lot of people need that, right?
100%. Anything else that you want to, any messages that you want to give to people about the butterfly guard? What are some of the most common mistakes you see when people are trying to get good at it? What are the things you think people need to work on?
Give it a chance. I mean, it's not the easiest guard to get the hang of. Like I said, there's a lot of movement involved from the opponent. You can get squished. People can make you flat, and then all of a sudden it feels like you don't have any control sometimes. But it's an incredibly valuable guard. It has a lot of application, gi, no gi, self-defense. You see people in MMA doing butterfly guard, sweeping, you know what I mean? So it's something that if you invest the time in it, it really has a very big application. You know what I mean? And I would highly recommend, don't just do it for a little while and say, oh, it's not for me, right? It also, I think it's equally good for tall people and short people, which is a little bit of an anomaly in jiu-jitsu. There's some really great tall people that have a great butterfly. There's some really great short people. And I think that's one of the few guards where you can really say that's the case, right? So it's very variable to different body types.
So it's an all-inclusive guard. I mean, 100%. You're tall and lanky for your weight.
Yes.
And somebody like Marcelo Garcia is not tall and lanky, is kind of short and stubby, and you both made the butterfly guard a huge part of your game. Yeah. So what's the difference between a long-legged butterfly guard game and a short-legged butterfly guard game?
I think, most of the time, this is not always the case, but I think in general, a taller person is going to use more overhook. That's what I do. And a shorter person is going to use more underhook. Does that make sense? Now, the way the guard, besides that, the guard does operate a little bit differently with short and tall. So a shorter person, and I've said this many times before, they can rearrange their legs very easily, right? If they get out of position, they can reposition their legs very easily because they're short, they're harder for an opponent to control. A taller person, right, once they get their legs in position, they're very hard to disengage from. So I think that's one reason a taller person can use that overhook. Oftentimes, even though they get flat on their back, the person can't actually jump off their hooks. And then when they start trying to jump, the person is able to get onto their side and then make that sweep. So once the taller person gets into the position and locks hold, it's really hard to get away from. Now, a shorter person, they're going to do better at getting in nice and tight. And then even if the person gets off their hook, they can reposition. Now, that's just general. I'm not saying that, I'm tall, I still underhook. I still use it, right? But a lot of the times I'm using that overhook because I'm able to make my feet maybe a bit stickier than a shorter person, right?
Okay. That's a really good breakdown. If anyone's interested in the book, they can grab it on Amazon.com. If they search for Non-Stop Jiu-Jitsu book, they'll find it. It's also available on Amazon, the Italian Amazon, the Japanese Amazon, the British Amazon, the Canadian Amazon. Who am I forgetting? I think the Australian Amazon. I saw it on there and then it disappeared. So I don't know what's up with the Australian Amazon right now. Or you can go to grapplers.com, and if you poke around for 3 seconds, you'll definitely find it there. Anyway, thanks so much for sharing that stuff about the butterfly guard, Brandon. I think it'll really help people.
Thanks for having me, Stephan.
This idea of connecting your sweeps with your guard passes with your submissions is a really dominant theme in non-stop jiu-jitsu. That's actually what non-stop means. You don't stop. You sweep the guy, and then you don't stop. You keep going to the pass. And you don't stop. You keep going to the submission. Check out Non-Stop Jiu-Jitsu on Amazon.